Doogie and Judd on SKOR North and SKORNorth.com.
And it's bonus scoop time, which means Zolgad, Darren Doogie Wolfson of Channel 5 Eyewitness News, sports fame, and also the Scoop podcast here on SKOR North, executive producer Declan Goff. And Doogie, happy Tuesday to you. Let's start with this. How should we be feeling about a Wolves club that again started 2-0, but this time we heard it's different. They're a different team. It's a different, and last night somehow blew in the fourth quarter, 16-point lead to the Grizzlies. They've now lost 5 consecutive games. And I think a lot of the things that you said that this team needs are now coming to light as far as being problems. But what's your current state of the Timberwolves address right now?
I had an NBA employee yesterday, Judd, text me. Now, he's a Wolves pessimist. Now, he was very anti-Gerson Rosas. He really enjoys Sachin Gupta. But he texted me yesterday with this question. When do the Wolves next win a game? I said, and this was about lunchtime yesterday. I said, maybe tonight. He goes, no, you're underselling how hard Memphis plays. We saw that on display last night that they said, okay, yeah, we're down 17 with 8 minutes to go, 7.5 minutes to go. They were down, 13 after that great play, DAngelo Russell to Jaden McDaniels. McDaniels goes in for the dunk. At that moment, there was 4:42 left. The Wolves did not score another field goal until Cat's 3 at the buzzer forced overtime. Go back and watch those possessions from the 4:42 mark on. There was one possession where Ants got the ball, initiating the offense. Cat is trying to get to the elbow. Russell is trying to get to the other elbow. The Memphis defenders are pushing those guys out. It was a weak pass. Melton ends up with the ball. They end up with a dunk. I mean, that was just one example, but so many broken possessions late in that game, which, speaks to just how broken this roster is. That being said, I can be somewhat of an optimist and tell you, who is capturing that 10 seed in the Western Conference? I still think there is. Now, maybe it's not, big time logical, but I do think there is a pathway for them to make the play-in tournament, which would be a step in the right direction for this franchise because the bar is so incredibly low. But back to the question, Judd, look at the schedule over the next week to 10 days. When do they next win a game? Maybe this weekend with LeBron James presumably still out, but LeBron, they said initially, out 7, 8, 9 days. That Wolves-Lakers game this upcoming weekend is day 7 or day 8. So maybe LeBron is back. But even so, the Lakers beat the Hornets last night without LeBron. So not easy to win in the Staples Center. So I'm just saying, look at the schedule. Find me the next time the Wolves win a game.
Boy, that's depressing. How much do you think that Chris Finch is surprised and or having to learn on the job as far as what his expectations were back when he was hired, as opposed to now when he's had several consecutive doses of reality, which has, for the most part, not been positive?
Well, I mean, think about some of the stops he had after Houston, like Denver, like New Orleans. Look at those rosters he was a part of. Toronto. There was some size there, certainly more size than this roster. So, I mean, I think he's always realized that this roster had warts. Now, it was great to have, for Chris's sake, DAngelo Russell back last night, at least early. There were enough portions of that game where there was enough offensive flow compared to the games that DAngelo missed. Heck, I took the boys on Friday night to that Clippers game, the second of those Clippers games.
Oh, sorry about that.
I mean, that was borderline unwatchable after they were up 20. So there's a pattern here, Judd, right?
Yes.
Up, significant amounts, then blowing those leads, whether it's earlier in the game or like we saw last night in Memphis. Look at some of the fourth quarters. Think about the fourth quarter against Orlando, how atrocious that was. But I think Chris realizes that the roster needs all sorts of work. That being said, I don't think they're running his offense. And yeah, I'm on record suggesting, and this is more just from a lot of my contacts in the NBA, but Judd, it's not like I heard anybody say this guy can't coach offense. The book on him has always been he is a brilliant offensive mind. Really smart people in the league have told me that. JB Bickerstaff, many others who have worked with Chris tell me this man knows how to coach offense. I don't think this is necessarily all his fault. When they're playing a lot of hero ball, when it's one pass, jack up a shot, like I think back to last Friday, how many just one pass, Malik Beasley jacking up a three, missing said three. That's not Chris Finch's offense. So sure, is he to blame somewhat? Yeah, he's the ultimate boss here. But I'm not gonna throw a ton of blame his way. I'm sorry, I'm not.
Tell me this, Doogie. So most importantly, as the season progresses and it becomes clear who fits, who does not fit, blah, 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 go down that whole path. And this is going to be a very simple question, but I have a feeling the answer might be complex. Who is running this team? Because you know, when I go to games, you two, Glenn Taylor's by the bench. Mark is across the court, and I guess that he was in Memphis last night. Sachin Gupta is running the basketball operation, but he doesn't have the POBO title. So what's your sense of who's in charge here and where the next decisions will come from? Glenn, Mark, Sachin, combination, which to me seems dangerous?
Well, it's Glenn, Judd. Like if Sachin Gupta can execute a trade today, it's not possible. Just it takes two to tango. Like teams are not open-minded to making trades right this second. But let's say Daryl Morey, hypothetically, Daryl Morey finally says, okay, we will take 2 future first-round picks. We'll take Jaden McDaniels. We'll take salary filler, you know, whomever that might be, Malik Beasley, whatever. But the centerpiece of this Ben Simmons trade, you give us Jaden McDaniels, you give us 2 future first-round picks, whatever the protection on those picks would be, because this is hypothetical, okay? Although the Wolves would be open-minded to such a scenario, but Philadelphia right now is not. Sachin Gupta would call Glenn. His first phone call isn't to Mark Lowry seeking permission to execute said trade. That first phone call would be to Glenn Taylor. So Glenn Taylor is still running things, but yeah, Mark is omnipresent. Mark was in Memphis last night. He does a lot with St. Jude's, you know, going back to his connection with Rich Eisen. So, you know, he made a stop at St. Jude's there in Memphis yesterday. But yeah, I mean, Mark is all around, right? Like you see how visible he is. You see on the Wolves social media platforms, him sitting courtside the other night with Eric Kendricks of the Vikings, Rachel Banham of the Lynx, although she might be a free agent, but you get my point. She was there with a teammate sitting next to Mark. Like, he's all over the place, but this is still Glenn's team. That's why I've had a couple people tell me, Judd, we can talk all we want about the Wolves after this season, making a strong push for an Elton Brand type to run the front office. Maybe, you know, somebody else that's out there, maybe not Masai Ujiri, but, you know, when his name came up before he re-signed in Toronto, that talk of an NBA franchise offering Masai a sliver of ownership, that there was some buzz that maybe that was the Wolves. I'd heard there was at least some internal dialogue about Masai's name. I don't know if it got all the way to the point of the Wolves making him a firm offer that included a sliver of ownership. But the point is, you know, if the Wolves, you know, want to go after somebody like that, I'm not quite sure Glenn is going to give the green light. That Glenn is still, I sense, interested in saving a few bucks. So I think Sachin Gupta has a realistic chance to maintain his position, even though he doesn't have the official title right now, maybe eventually getting the title, but being the final say when it comes to transactions, because a big reason would be Glenn could save money over the next couple of years.
Okay, if Lowry steps in though and says, Glenn, I will pay the difference. Like
well, maybe. I mean, I'm not dismissing that sort of scenario, Judd. I mean, we've seen it. I mean, I've talked about this so many times. Glenn can be influenced. So Glenn may be thinking one way right now. All it takes is a conversation, and Glenn can be convinced to do something. Trust me, he never way back when Tibbs wanted to trade Ricky Rubio, Glenn didn't want to trade Ricky Rubio, but guess what? Tibbs convinced him. And I can give you any number of examples along those lines. So yes, is it entirely possible that Mark Lowry has that conversation with Glenn and says, hey, I know Sachin's contract is up after the year, so it would stink if we end up losing him because, he was far down the path of ending up in Houston. Like if Gerson had given him permission, back before the draft, he was going to join the Rockets as their number 2. So Raphael Stone in Houston presumably would still have interest in Sachin. So Sachin's contract is up after the season. But like if Mark says, hey, like I really want Elton Brand. I firmly believe in Elton Brand. Here's why I believe in Elton Brand. He needs to lead our front office. I think he can convince Glenn on something like that. But I'm just saying, Glenn right now, I think is thinking along the lines of, hey, if I can save some money and Sachin, proves his worth, yeah, let's just keep him in place.
Speaking of blowing leads, the Vikings blew their lead against Baltimore on Sunday, now 3-5. I think we all assume that Zim is in his last year. But let's go to the GM's chair, Rick Spielman. What are you hearing, and what's your sense about how the Wilfs feel about a GM who has worked for the franchise, just to be clear here, since 2006, has been the GM since 2012. The point being is Spielman has a lot of equity built up with the people that own the Vikings. That being said, do you think that they're going to tab Spielman to pick the next coach, or are they going to clean house?
Well, I'll tell you this much. Spielman certainly has survived some things over the years, and he is operating as if he is going to be here. He's made a number of scouting trips, which he does year after year. He was at the Penn State-Maryland game over the weekend. He was at Nevada a few weeks ago. He was in Syracuse, New York, like a month ago to watch the Liberty quarterback play against the Orange. So, he is operating as if he is going to be in charge of the draft come next April. Now, I suppose until he's told otherwise, why wouldn't he operate as such? But yeah, I get your point, Judd. Like, those two have to be attached in so many ways, Zim and Rick. If you're going to make the move on Zim, and I'm with you, it seems like it's inevitable at this point, that how would you allow then Rick to hire the next head coach? But I certainly don't have any strong steam to suggest that Rick is in all sorts of trouble. But I'm just saying, like, I can't wrap my arms around the idea of Rick being allowed to hire this team's next head coach.
Right, exactly. And Rick, and some of this is bad luck, but certainly his own fault, has not found the quarterback. He hired Mike more because he's a defensive guy who could stop offenses at the time. And so I don't know if Rick has equity built up per se in finding offensive players, quarterbacks, coaches, guys that can coach it. So I don't know that there is enough of a track record there to say I trust him entirely. And it might just be time for a change. Time for a change happens. It comes. So that's why I ask, because it feels like we talk about Zim a lot, rightfully so. It feels like we probably aren't talking about the GM.
I think that's fair. If you're the Wilfs, just go back the last couple of years, look at the last two draft classes. Now, Cam Bynum, by the way, that was pretty good on Sunday. So
yeah, it was.
But if you look at the last two draft classes, if you look at the mismanagement of the roster, in terms of Anthony Barr not going on IR, Michael Pierce not going on IR, the Harrison Smith extension, was that really necessary? There's some other examples, but those are immediate. I think there's enough there that if the Wilfs say, okay, we need to justify why we're making the move on Rick to the fan base, I think there's a lot they could point to.
As far as Twins team goes, I found it intriguing that Jace Tingler, who was in charge of the Padres last year, and at one time I think was a pretty hot commodity. Now the Padres completely tanked. Was hired as Rocco's bench coach. Just quickly, what I find intriguing is this a way to get more of a in-game baseball guy by Baldelli? Because it did seem this past year that there were some very questionable decisions made. And it's weird because Zimmer, Fleck, Rocco, same problem. In-game, not good. But did you sense that Tingler was brought on board in part to give Baldelli a sounding board of a guy who might say, we should pinch hit here, we should make a pitching change here? Because, Rocco, for the first time, and it was a tragedy that David Bell died, but for the first time, it really seemed that we saw games where you said, what's he doing during the game?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, Rocco has a long way to go when it comes to bullpen management. I mean, that would be the number one thing to me strategically in game. And yeah, so I mean, Jace is going to be a sounding board. He's got the history with Thad Levine from their days together in the Rangers organization. From afar, it seems like a pretty good hire. Like Rocco needs somebody like this. I think they nailed this hire. And so I really, really like it. Now, I'll also add, I was in the company of a really good minor leaguer yesterday. I won't say what position, but he's a good player. He's a guy that is going, the path he's on, he is going to be in the majors. It might be a couple years, but he will be in the majors. Maybe sooner, but he will be in the majors. He was making the point based on his minor league experience so far. He was making the point to me, being literally in the belly of the beast, that managers just don't do a whole lot anymore. That like he was bringing up the example of having some friends in the Rays organization. This is not a player in the Rays organization, but he's saying Kevin Cash gets a ton of credit for the way he manages the Rays. That there's a lot of stuff that goes on pregame in terms of how the lineup is constructed. You know, the front office having its fingerprints all over a lot of things, even some, predetermined pitching changes. Now I'm not suggesting the manager didn't do anything, but I'm just saying, like, it's comparable here. Like, I know how involved pregame, and I get it. It's their livelihood, but that Derek and Thad are. I mean, they spend a lot of time pregame with Rocco. So, sure, they talk about lineup construction. Sure, they talk about different scenarios. If tonight's game goes this way, here's what we would do. If tonight's game goes that way, here's what we would do. So, like, I like the hire. And, yeah, a manager does enough. But, like, this isn't the 80s. It's just, to me, the job of the manager in general. But I think it speaks to the team we cover. It's a lot different than it used to be.
Did this person say that he thinks, conspiracy theory-wise, that there might be some text sent in-game as well?
Well,
because I've always heard that's the potential.
Yeah, I mean, he thinks one of the phones, that there's more a phone line, that rings up into the GM's box. But yes, this player did suggest such a thing. Yes. Now I don't have my own evidence of such a thing, but yeah. But like, go back to Snell being taken out, in the World Series, right, for Tampa. Like, he's like, do you really think Kevin Cash deep down wanted to take Snell out of the game in that situation? That was from above. That was above Cash. And the manager should have the power there. Just read the game, the game flow. That maybe Snell's numbers overall aren't great. Maybe facing a lineup a third time, but on this particular night, the way he's rolling, let's keep him out there. I'm just saying that was one example the player used. That he firmly believes, from his friends in the Rays organization, he firmly believes that Kevin Cash did not make that decision by himself to remove Snell.
Interesting stuff. More Twins team?
Yeah, so Andrew Heaney is a left-handed pitcher. As far as I can tell, the first free agent, at least significant free agent, off the board. So yesterday, he ends up agreeing to a deal with the LA Dodgers, 1 year, just over $8 million guaranteed. Jed, I'm told the Twins made an offer. That his camp made it known that he wanted to wrap up a deal sooner rather than later, did not want this thing to linger for a while, wanted to get a deal done before what appears to be a lockout coming as of December 1st. And so his representation let teams know, hey, my guy wants to sign very soon. I am told the Twins made a competitive offer. Now, I know fans don't want to hear this because the Twins end up swinging and missing on so many free agents, but I'm told they made a competitive offer. Now, it wasn't as much as the LA Dodgers guaranteed. So he took more money guaranteed from the Dodgers, but I'm told the Twins offer had a lot of performance bonuses built in, that if Heaney, ends up, reaching his potential, and if you look at the underlying numbers, there's something there. Now, he may not He may not hit his potential. Trust me, he did not have a good 2021. But there is a thought, maybe not quite Robbie Ray-esque, but there is a thought that this guy has got a lot of bounce back in him. And heck, a smart organization like the Dodgers sees something there, right? That they wanted him. But I'm told the Twins made him an offer. He just happened to take the Dodgers offer instead. But I'm told it was a competitive offer made by the Twins.
Dukes, do you feel like, and maybe this is not just the Twins, but teams and executives in general, because of the looming lockout, are going to be maybe more aggressive in this like hot stove season, trying to lock up players before that lockout? Do you think players are still just going to wait it out? We've seen so many big names signed so late in the last few years in free agency, Dukes. Do you think that teams are actually going to put more of an emphasis to get players locked in now before this damn CBA most likely runs out?
I think it depends. Like, I've checked on some other free agents that to me make a lot of sense for the Twins, like John Gray. I checked on John Gray yesterday afternoon. As of now it's only been technically, 24 hours of free agency so far, so it's still incredibly early. Major League Baseball free agency is not like the NBA, NHL, and NFL. I wish it was, but it's not. But I checked on John Gray. So far, the Twins have not even made a phone call on Gray. So if you're the Twins, you may end up waiting just to see what the new CBA looks like. Now, depending on the player, like if you're, Carlos Correa, now I still think Carlos ends up in Detroit. I think that, I'd make them the betting favorite. And so maybe if you're the number one guy and Detroit makes that $30 million, $35 million a year offer right now, maybe you just jump all over it. But if you're one of the upper echelon free agents, Marcus Semien, a guy like that, you can probably wait. But if you're a middle tier or even below the middle tier, like an Andrew Henne, you may want to jump on an offer more immediately. Let your agent know to be proactive. Reach out to teams. I mean, this, from what I can gather, this is more his camp being proactive, reaching out to teams saying, hey, my client wants to sign very soon. Are you interested? As opposed to the Twins picking up the phone and saying, this is the guy we're targeting. Let's make an offer.
Let's close with Gopher Football. Sky U WTF happened against Illinois, Doogie. This is one of the more disappointing. I mean, you had the chance probably to play a primetime game in Iowa on Saturday. It would have been a huge game. And for the second time this year, you inexcusably go out and lay an egg. And I'll just start you with this question, and then the floor is yours. How is Mike Sanford Jr. with Matt Simon on staff, who called plays against Auburn? How is this guy still calling plays post Bowling Green, and you knew this was coming again? This drives me crazy.
Well, I'll let you know if Mike Sanford Jr.'s house is on the market anytime soon. A friend of mine is right in that neighborhood, so I'll keep you posted on that front. So far, the house is not for sale. Now, the comeback, Judd, is in 6 games, they've scored 30 points or more. So in most of their games, his play calling has worked. There is something to be said, them being down all these running backs. That being said, what we saw on Saturday is unacceptable. Correct. That can't happen. And correct. I mean, the receivers are running routes, 13 to 15 yards down the field when Illinois' defensive front is manhandling the Gophers' offensive line. Unfortunately, Sam Schluter, who's been a pretty good left tackle in his Gophers career, but he has like 1 or 2 games a year where he just gets manhandled. Unfortunately, last Saturday was that game where Sam Schluter, the Gophers' left tackle, got destroyed. And I didn't see the Gophers' offensive line getting pummeled like that. So I do think there's probably some bounce back there. Now, I'm not quite sure they win Saturday in Iowa, but they could certainly win at Indiana. Indiana hasn't won a Big Ten game yet. So it's not like the Gophers are going to go winless here in November. I still feel relatively confident about the Gophers at least winning in Bloomington, maybe even beating Wisconsin here, because I still don't think this is a real good Wisconsin team. But I don't feel great about the matchup with Iowa, because I think Iowa's defensive line can do some comparable stuff. And I think Iowa's offensive line is really good, including that center that's a top 50 NFL prospect where, I think they can win in the trenches. And so because of that, and because Iowa just doesn't really turn over the football, now maybe the Gophers can get lucky, get fortunate, create a turnover or two. But I don't really like the matchup on Saturday. But I still think the Gophers can get another win, if not a couple more wins, still finish relatively strong. That I think they can bounce back. But yeah, I mean, I would have made a change. Judd, I would have made a change at the quarterback position. I would have made a change, and I'm biased. Zach Annexstad beat out Tanner Morgan in 2018. So there's something there. He's going to take more risks, but he's got the better arm. Okay. And so I'm okay with occasionally stretching the field. Now, they didn't have the protection on Saturday, but hold on just to give a jolt, I would have made that move.
Wait. Just wait for a second. How do you not adjust? You're playing Illinois, and to your point, your O-line is getting their ass kicked. Your run game does not work. Unfortunate, but it happens. And, Chris Ottman-Bell, until he got hurt, was a forgotten man. How is he not? He can run those slants perfectly. The Vikings and Gophers are literally going into games with sabotaging scripts. They're sabotaging.
Well, you have to be able to make some in-game adjustments, and that's where Mike Sanford Jr., PJ Fleck, others deserve criticism. I was over at PJ Fleck's news conference yesterday. Daniel House, who does a great job, Gopher Guru, Daniel's the man. Like, he had these bar graphs. He was laying it out to me how absurd it was that these Gophers receivers were running such deep routes.
Correct.
Why wasn't there this logical adjustment? So it wasn't all on Tanner. I'm just saying, just to give the chance of giving a spark, no guarantees. But I would have made a quarterback change at the half. It's unfortunate because I do think there's some talent there with Zach Annexstad, and I'm not quite sure what the heck he could do to get back into a game.
Agreed. All right, clean out the notes, and then we will be done. Doogie, what else do you got for us?
Well, Ben Johnson, Gophers era begins officially tonight. He will have a number of friends and family at the game. I talked to him yesterday. He said it will hit him. When he's walking up the steps there to the court tonight, he'll have a moment. I mean, this has been one heck of a journey. He's been a long-time assistant coach, not incredibly rare, but oftentimes rare to make the jump to a really big school from being an assistant coach. Normally you take a head coaching job at a mid-major, right? So, Ben is incredibly grateful. He realizes how fortunate he is. I do think it is going to be a long year for his team, but let's give it some time. National Signing Day begins tomorrow. Braden Carrington. They've got Pharrell Payne. They've got Ola Joseph, who's playing at Prolific Prep out west. Those three are already committed for the 2022 recruiting class. Those three kids can play. They really can. So, recruiting is already off to a good start. Let's give Ben a little bit of a leash before, just hammering him, because I'm trying to make sure that Gophers fans realize it's going to be a difficult year, but he deserves some time. And Lindsay Whalen's team opens up their season, her fourth year here. It's time for them to make the NCAA tournament. They have all these players back. Now, they weren't great last year, but they had a number of injuries, COVID issues. There's some talent there for sure. And so it's time for Lindsay's team to make the NCAA tournament. They open up here in about 30 minutes at home against Jacksonville.
All right, sir. We'll talk to you Thursday with more scoopage. All right.
Okay. Sounds good, Judd. Declan, take it easy. Bye-bye.
Talk to you. Bye.